The modern-day nation of Iran plays a pivotal role in the Bible's grand narrative of prophecy and world events. While most people tend to focus on nations like Israel, Egypt, and Babylon when they think of biblical history, Iran, known as Persia in ancient times, is often overlooked. But what if I told you that Persia was not just another empire? Rather, it was a nation specifically named in biblical prophecy, one destined to shape the fate of God's chosen people. Iran's biblical origins are more fascinating than you might think. From the lineage of Noah to the reign of Cyrus the Great, the history of the Iranian people is intricately woven into some of the most critical moments in Scripture. Perhaps the most astonishing revelation is that God used Persia, a nation ruled by pagan kings, to deliver Israel, rebuild the temple, and fulfill prophecies spoken centuries before they came to pass. In this exploration, we'll dive into how the Bible uncovers the origins of the Iranian people, traces their rise to power, and highlights their central role in shaping not only the Old Testament, but also future prophetic visions. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to learn may change the way you view Iran, not merely as a modern-day nation, but as a key player in God's unfolding plan for the entire world. To understand Iran's biblical roots, we must travel back to the story of Noah and his descendants after the Great Flood. Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the progenitors of all the nations of the earth, according to the genealogical account in Genesis 10, known as the Table of Nations. One of Japheth's sons was Madai, the ancestor of the Medes. The Medes later became closely associated with the Persians, and together, they laid the foundation for what would become the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history. Madai's descendants, the Medes, settled in the region that would eventually become modern-day Iran. The Persians, emerging from the same geographical area, would rise to prominence later, but both groups shared a common ancestry rooted in the Iranian plateau. This connection places the ancestors of the Iranians firmly within the biblical narrative from the very beginning of post-flood history. Their genealogical link to Japheth through Madai ties them to one of the oldest and most significant lineages in the Bible, setting the stage for their profound role in God's redemptive history. Fast forward several centuries, and we witness the rise of Persia, a kingdom that would become a dominant force in the biblical narrative. The Medes and Persians formed an alliance under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire. At its peak, this empire stretched from the Indus River in the east to North Africa in the west, encompassing many of the regions mentioned in the Bible, including Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. However, Persia's true significance lies not in its vast military or territorial might, but in how God used it to fulfill his divine promises to the Israelites. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled the people of Judah. For 70 years, the Israelites remained in Babylonian captivity, just as the prophet Jeremiah had foretold. But then came a pivotal moment in history. Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, conquered Babylon in 5539 BC, and everything changed. The book of Ezra begins with an extraordinary decree from Cyrus, allowing the Israelites to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This monumental event is recorded in Ezra 1, 2-4, where Cyrus proclaims, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah." Remarkably, this same Cyrus had been named by the prophet Isaiah over a century earlier as the one who would carry out God's will to restore Israel. A pagan king, foretold by name, became an instrument in the hands of God to bring about one of the most significant fulfillments of prophecy in biblical history. One of the most astonishing moments in biblical history is the role that Persia, a nation outside of God's covenant, played in his divine plan of redemption for his people. This marks a profound turning point for Israel and underscores Persia's crucial role in fulfilling God's purposes. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Persia's legacy in the Bible is the pivotal role of Cyrus the Great. In Isaiah 44:28, God refers to Cyrus by name more than 150 years before his birth, calling him his shepherd who would accomplish his will. Even more striking, in Isaiah 45 verse 1, Cyrus is called God's anointed, a title typically reserved for Israelite kings. How could a foreign pagan king be designated as God's anointed? The answer lies in God's sovereignty, his ability to use anyone, even those outside his covenant, to fulfill his divine purposes. Cyrus's decree allowing the Jews to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem was not merely a political maneuver. It was the fulfillment of prophecy. The prophet Jeremiah had foretold that the Babylonian captivity would last 70 years. Jeremiah 25 verse 1-12, 29 verse 10, and Cyrus's rise to power marked the end of that period. Under the leadership of Zerubbabel and with Cyrus's blessing, the temple in Jerusalem was rebuilt, a vital step in the restoration of Israel. In this moment, God used Persia not only to conquer Babylon, the nation that had oppressed Israel, but also to facilitate Israel's rebirth as a nation. This narrative reminds Israel and the world that God's plan transcends empires and rulers. He can use even the most unlikely figures to bring about his will. Persia's role in biblical history doesn't end with Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple. The Book of Esther offers another powerful example of how God used Persia to protect his people. During the reign of King Xerxes I, known in the Bible as Ahasuerus, a plot was hatched by Haman, a high-ranking official, to exterminate the Jews living in the Persian Empire. Haman's hatred drove him to manipulate the king into issuing a decree for the annihilation of the Jewish people. However, in a striking turn of events, God's providence was at work. Esther, a young Jewish woman, had become queen of Persia. Encouraged by her uncle Mordecai, Esther courageously approached the king, revealing her Jewish identity and pleading for her people's survival. Esther 4:14 captures the famous words of Mordecai to her, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther's bold intervention led to a dramatic reversal. King Xerxes, upon learning of Haman's treachery, ordered his execution, and a new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. The story, recorded in the Book of Esther, is commemorated during the Jewish festival of Purim as a reminder of how God used Persia, and particularly Queen Esther, to preserve his people. Once again, a foreign empire became an instrument of divine protection, showcasing how God's hand guided the fate of Israel even when they were scattered across foreign lands. Persia was not just a passive observer in biblical history. It was an active participant in ensuring the survival and restoration of Israel, a nation destined to bring forth the Messiah. Beyond its historical role, Persia is central to several prophetic visions about the future of world empires and God's ultimate plan for humanity. One of the most powerful examples of this is found in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a Jewish prophet who lived during the Babylonian exile, served in the courts of both the Babylonian and Persian empires. In the book of Daniel, we find visions that foretell the rise and fall of empires, including Persia. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon dreams of a great statue made of different materials, each representing a world empire. The silver chest and arms of the statue symbolize the Medo-Persian Empire, which would follow Babylon as the dominant power in the ancient world. In Daniel 7, Daniel himself has a vision of 4 beasts, each representing a successive empire. The second beast, a bear raised up on one side, symbolizes the dual nature of the Medo-Persian Empire, reflecting the combined strength of the Medes and the Persians. This empire's vast reach, especially under Cyrus, would forever change the course of history. Another significant vision involving Persia is found in Daniel 8, where Daniel sees a ram with 2 horns, representing the Medes and the Persians. The ram charges in all directions, conquering vast territories. However, the vision also introduces a goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece and its king, Alexander the Great, who would eventually conquer the Persian Empire. This vision not only highlights Persia's monumental role in history, but also sets the stage for future events, showing that Persia, though a powerful empire, was part of a larger divine narrative unfolding across the centuries. Many scholars believe that the Magi, who traveled to worship the newborn king of the Jews, were likely from Persia and were possibly Zoroastrian priests. Zoroastrianism was an ancient religious tradition in Persia that placed great emphasis on astrology and interpreting celestial omens. The Magi's journey highlights Persia's enduring connection to biblical narratives, even centuries after the fall of the Persian Empire. Though the empire itself had faded, the wisdom traditions of Persia continued to influence the ancient Near East. Persian scholars, renowned for their understanding of the stars, were among the first to recognize the significance of the star that signaled Jesus' birth. Moreover, Persia's legacy of tolerance toward diverse cultures and religions had a lasting impact on the region. The Persian Empire was known for allowing its subjects to maintain their religious practices, fostering an environment of religious freedom. This policy influenced later empires, including Rome, and contributed to the flourishing of Jewish communities throughout the region. This atmosphere of acceptance helped lay the groundwork for the eventual spread of Christianity. Persia's openness not only safeguarded the religious heritage of its peoples, but also set the stage for the gospel to reach new territories across the Roman Empire. As we reflect on Persia's influence in biblical history, it is also important to consider its future role in light of biblical prophecy. Many theologians and scholars believe that Iran, identified as Persia in biblical texts, will play a key role in the events of the end times. One of the most prominent prophecies involving Persia can be found in Ezekiel 38:39, where the prophet describes a future coalition of nations that will rise against Israel in the last days. Persia is named as one of the nations that will join forces with Gog of Magog in a massive battle known as the War of Gog and Magog. This prophecy, which many interpret as an event yet to occur, foretells a climactic confrontation between the forces of evil and God's people, with Israel at the heart of the conflict. Though the exact timing and nature of this war remain topics of debate, the inclusion of Persia, modern-day Iran, in the prophecy suggests that Iran's role in regional affairs will continue to have profound spiritual significance. The prophetic books of Daniel and Isaiah also emphasize Persia's place in God's divine plan, underscoring the rise and fall of empires as being under God's control. Daniel's visions of world history, including the dominance of Persia, illustrate the theme of God's sovereignty over all nations. Persia's part in biblical prophecy serves as a reminder that no empire, no matter how mighty, is beyond God's authority. He raises up nations, and he brings them down according to his divine purpose. As we observe contemporary events in the Middle East, including the ongoing tensions between Iran and Israel, it is crucial to remember that these are part of a larger narrative, a divine story that began in the pages of the Bible and will culminate in the fulfillment of God's promises. The story of Persia, known today as Iran, is one of the most compelling examples of how God can use even the most unlikely nations to accomplish his will. From its biblical origins, through the descendants of Japheth's son Madai, to the rise of Cyrus the Great, Persia played a pivotal role in the restoration of Israel and the protection of the Jewish people, as famously recorded in the Book of Esther. Yet, Persia's significance is not confined to the past. The prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel remind us that Persia is part of God's grand design, not only for past events, but also for those yet to come. Iran's place in biblical prophecy points to its continued influence in the unfolding events that lead to the end times. As we examine the current tensions between Iran and Israel, it is essential to approach these developments through a biblical lens. The sovereignty of God over all nations assures us that every kingdom, empire, and leader plays a role in his divine plan. Even in the midst of geopolitical struggles, God's overarching purpose for the nations remains intact, guiding history toward its ultimate fulfillment. The story of Persia serves as a powerful reminder that God can work through any nation, even foreign empires, to bring his divine promises to fruition and advance his ultimate plan for salvation. Persia, known today as Iran, played a pivotal role in biblical history, demonstrating how God's hand can guide the course of human events in ways that transcend borders and rulers. From the rise of the Persian Empire, which allowed the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland, to its continued influence on the global stage today, Persia's legacy is a profound testament to God's sovereignty over nations and history. Persia's connection to the Bible illustrates that history is not merely a series of events marked by the rise and fall of empires. Instead, it reveals the unfolding of a divine narrative, one in which God weaves together the threads of human decisions, cultures, and kingdoms to fulfill his redemptive purposes. As we look at Persia's enduring influence and its role in biblical prophecy, we are reminded that history is far more than political shifts. It is the ongoing realization of God's plan for the salvation of his people and the world.